This video will show how to protect a Photoshop plugin for Mac or Windows. For this demonstration, we've used the Dissolve plugin from Adobe Software Development Kit and built it with the Xcode development system. Here we can see how the unprotected plugin works. We'll choose the plugin. It pops up a dialog and then applies whatever that plugin does. Now let's undo this and look at a protected version of the same plugin. The protected plugin works exactly the same, except it requires activation on first launch. We'll present the plugin, click OK, and we see an activation dialog is presented. If you click Activate later, dialog goes away and the effects of the plugin are not applied. We'll try that again. We'll choose, and let's say this time we enter an invalid activation code. And here it gives us a message that an invalid activation code was entered. Finally, we'll go ahead and enter a valid activation code this time. So again, the activation dialog is applied. We enter a valid activation code for this specific plugin, and now the effects of the plugin are applied. If we undo the effects and select the same plugin again, it's now been activated, so no activation dialog is presented, and it just immediately applies the effects of the plugin. To build the Mac version of our protected plugin, we'll drop in a couple of interface files into our Xcode project that link it to the quick license runtime provided by these files, and then that will be bound to a specific license that we're going to define now using the quick license application. Preview how we set up this simple product license. We've named the license, given a version number and a security code. Those 3 bits of information will be referenced from one of the lines within the source code that we'll be pasting into our Xcode project to bind it to this specific license. We'll bring up the license dialog and look at how the simple product license was defined. It never times out, allows reactivation on the same computer. We've decided to show runtime errors, so the runtime will actually pop up a message indicating if something went wrong, for example, if the user enters an invalid activation code. And it requires activation. It's machine calculated, so it's activated to a specific computer. And let's go ahead and click Make Ticket now, and we'll generate the ticket file that defines this license, and we'll take a look at it in just a moment. Here's the ticket file. Quick license can be used to define a variety of different types of licenses, trial licenses that expire after X number of days or Y number of launches, product licenses, try-by licenses, subscription licenses, floating licenses. Whatever type of license you define, generate a ticket file, you can then bind that to your protected plugin. We've made a copy of the source folder for Adobe's Dissolve plugin in their examples, and we'll take our 4 files, copy them, and paste them into the Mac folder. And then we'll open it up into Xcode, and before we actually apply any of those code files, we'll build the unprotected plugin to make sure there aren't any kind of compile errors. And once we see it's successful, we can select the plugin and we'll see the path to where that unprotected plugin is stored. Now we'll add the protection code files to our project. So under the File menu, we'll choose the Add Files command and select the files that we want to add. Click the Add button. We'll also want to select the External Frameworks and Libraries group and add the WebKit framework. Again, we'll use the Add command under the File menu, and we'll have to locate that under System, Libraries, Frameworks, and double click on the WebKit framework and click Add. And then we can go to the main file that includes the main routine for the entry point of our plugin, which is called plugin main. And within this file, we're going to add and include. So we'll put the include file, which references our protection command, and we're going to locate one spot where we want to call the protection system, and you can decide where the best place is based on the nature of your plugin. For example, if we locate the doStart function for this particular plugin source code, here's the doStart function, and we'll call a function called check license, and we'll make that call right at this location. So essentially, each time the doStart function runs, it's going to check the license, and if it's not a valid license, it's going to set to is okay to false, and so it won't actually do the functionality of that plugin. And then we'll look at this check license, which is in command.cpp, and if we look at the check license function, we'll scroll down to see that function, and we can see that it binds our plugin to a specific named license called my license with a version number and a security code. That's those 3 bits of information that was defined within Quick License when we created the ticket file. And the rest of it, the code within this file, remains unchanged. Essentially what's happening is it's sending this request message string to the runtime and getting back a response, which is a semicolon delimited set of parameters. We pull out the 11th parameter, convert it to an integer. If it's a negative value, some kind of an error condition has occurred, like an invalid activation code was entered or whatever, and the runtime is ready presented an appropriate error message to the user. Otherwise, it's a valid activation, or if it's a second launch, it's just validated that the license is valid for this computer and it returns true. That's essentially how the code works. So we're almost ready to compile. We need to set a couple build settings before we compile the project. So we'll go into our build settings, and for base SDK under the architecture section, we'll select the latest OS, and then we'll scroll down towards the middle of the build settings, and where it says compile sources as, we need to select Objective C++. And we're now ready to choose the build command, and we can see we have successfully built a protected plugin. To test the plugin, copy the ticket file into the folder holding Photoshop. There's other places you can put it as well. In the plugins folder, we've copied in our protected plugin. Now when we launch Photoshop, we will see that when we select this plugin and do whatever we want to do with it, an activation dialog is presented. The plugin protection process is very similar on Windows. We'll copy 2 code files into our source folder. Here we put it in the common folder. We'll then open up Visual Studio and add them to our project. Here you can see we've added the qlrt.h file and the qlrt.cpp file. We'll go to the main routine that actually contains the source code for the main function, and we can see that is right here, plugin main. We'll add an include at the top, shown right here, where we include the source code for the connection to the runtime system. And we'll find our do start routine. Within that routine, we'll again make a call to check license. And if we take a look at the main code, we can see there's a reference to our license name, version number, and security code, just like we saw earlier on the Mac. Once everything is ready, we'll go ahead and build the solution. Assuming it builds without errors, the plugin is protected and ready to ship. In the folder holding our Photoshop application, we've copied in the ticket file that we created on the Mac. You could also create it on Windows using Quick License running on Windows. And we've also copied the Quick License Runtime DLL into the same folder. There's other places as well where those files can be stored. We'll locate the plugins folder and copy our protected plugin into that folder. Now we can launch into Photoshop, and when we try to apply that plugin, it runs normally, and we see we have an activation dialog that can activate in the same way that it was activating on the Mac computer. And there's our plugin. It's now functional. In this video, you've seen how to define a license and protect a Photoshop plugin. To get started, go to www.excelsoftware.com and click on the Protect and License button.